My guest today is Maria Stalsberg, the founder of Our Village School, an enrichment program in Lakeville, Minnesota, that focuses on hands-on, real-life learning through a wide variety of classes for homeschooled kids ages 6 and over. Maria holds a master's degree in teaching and a bachelor's degree in business administration. She began her career in corporate America before transitioning to the traditional education system, but ultimately stepped away to focus on raising her 4 children. After enrolling her oldest child in the local public elementary school for kindergarten and first grade, Maria found herself longing for a more dynamic, hands-on approach to learning. Determined to create something different, she pulled her oldest to homeschool and launched Our Village School in 2020. It started as just a 1 day a week program in her backyard with 18 kids and has since grown to, get this, now serving nearly 150 students with 4 days a week of programming and flexible attendance options. Just incredible. Maria Stalsberg, welcome to the Liberated podcast.
Thanks, Kerry. I'm glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, thanks for being here. I just think your story is incredible and is powerful and inspiring for those listening. Really speaks to this idea that if you can't find what you're looking for, don't be afraid to build it. And that's
Yep.
exactly what you've done. And it's clearly a phenomenal success. So I look forward to hearing how you did that, how you've
Yeah.
grown so dramatically over the past several years. But first, let's start with a little bit of your background because it sounds like you didn't intend to go into education to begin with. Maybe tell us a little bit about your experience in corporate America and what ultimately led you into education.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I thought I was going to be a high-powered business person. I went to school, got my undergrad in business administration, and kind of followed those traditional steps. I did a internship in New York City with DKNY. I had a fashion focus, landed the job for Target Corporation outside after school, was working on their buying team. And a couple years into that, I thought, gosh, I don't think this is for me. I want to have a family. And I was fortunate enough, Target has a lot of relationships with the community. And so I had an opportunity to volunteer in a school in the middle of my week. It was an inner city school. And I just walked from our corporate headquarters there. And that was the part that I loved about my day, was being able to get into the classroom. I was a reading mentor for this little guy. And I love that. And so I totally pivoted. I left corporate America. I enrolled in a master's program and went. It was a cohort for people kind of like me, similar, that they were going down a second career path. So I got my master's in teaching and yeah, just kind of totally pivoted and then entered the private school sector after I finished that program and taught there for a few years as well.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about that teaching experience. You said it was a private
Yeah.
school. What were you
Mhm.
teaching? What was that
Yeah.
like for you in
Yeah.
the traditional classroom?
Yes. So it was a breath of fresh air to leave the corporate world and get into the classroom. So I worked at a school in St. Paul, and I taught first and second. It was a combined classroom, first and second grade. I team taught. I had a fabulous teaching partner. She was a great mentor of mine. Our class sizes were 1 to 12. So we had, or our class size was 24, but our student teacher ratio was 1 to 12. And it was a great experience. I mean, we really liked it. It was a private school, so we weren't held to a lot of the different mandates that the public schools were held to. And so at that time, that was in, let's see, 2010. At that point, 2000, kind of in that 2009 to 2012 area. It was great. And when I left, it was a hard decision, but I left. Um, to raise our first daughter. And then when she went to school in the local neighborhood school, it was just so different. I was like, what? This is kindergarten's supposed to be, rainbows and unicorns and lots of play. And it just was not happening. So we kind of just did another pivot from there.
Yeah. So what did you notice in her experience? Was it this focus on sort of testing and
Yeah,
pushing curriculum standards to
totally.
younger
Yeah.
ages. What was that
Yeah,
like?
and just a lot of academics. And,
Mm,
I can remember asking her teacher at one point, like, well, where is the play in the day? And they had like a free play, like a choice time on Fridays. And that was like kind of it. I'm like, that just seems like that's not enough. And then the other biggest piece for me is we are an outdoorsy family. And for her to go and spend the bulk of her day inside, it was just a big change. And she was coming home, she'd be singing a song and I'd say, "Oh, where'd you learn that song?" And she said, "Oh, we did it on the screen for recess today or for PE." And I'm like, "Why didn't you go outside? Why weren't you outside at PE?" "Oh, it was we didn't get to go outside, or we don't do PE outside." And so it was this big thing of like, we got to get her out more. And then when COVID came, I had called the school to ask them what they were doing for any outdoor classroom planning. And at that time, the principal at that school said that they weren't looking into that really at all, that they were kind of focusing on, that it was a weird time, the 4x4 grids on the floor. And I was like, yeah, we're not doing that. We're not going to send them and put them in a grid. And yeah,
yeah. So it sounds like you were already not particularly happy with
yeah,
her learning experience initially in the school, and then COVID hit, and that sort of was the catalyst for you to do something different.
yeah.
Before COVID, though, had you started to think about the idea of launching your own school, or was that really a
No, I
result of
hadn't.
COVID?
I had
Okay.
said to my husband a few times, like, man, should I pull her and homeschool her? And, he's really supportive. Was like, I mean, you know what you're doing. You have a master's in teaching. And if you see what is happening is not, what you think should happen with her education, then go for it. But I think it was really COVID that pushed that, made that decision a little bit easier, because it was like, well, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do WebEx meetings. And so when I made that decision to pull her, it was like, okay, now what? Like, that's like, we're going to have to really figure this out. And so I started with looking for traditional homeschool co-ops. And where we live, there just wasn't anything at that point consistently meeting. They were meeting, twice a month at most. It was like the second and fourth Tuesdays. And I'm like, well, I had a social butterfly. So if I was going to pull her, how would she form friendships? And so it kind of just built from there. And I can remember looking at my husband on the couch one night and I said, I think the program that I want just doesn't exist. So I think I'm just going to build it. And he's like, all right, do it.
Incredible. So what
Yeah,
were those initial steps? You launched in 2020, but
yeah,
how did it work from sort of this idea to
yeah.
launch?
It's actually really funny. So we didn't technically launch as our village school in 2020. It was like a soft launch in my backyard where I kind of tested the waters in our
Yeah.
community to see like, okay, is anybody else feeling this way? And it was a weird time. Like, there were different executive orders, like how could we meet? And, meeting outside wasn't okay in our state at that time. And so I set it up as a donation-based class system, and I put a sign up genius out and just thought like, let me just see if what the response is. And so we scheduled, some classes. I put it out on social media and they filled up right away with a wait list. And I was like, okay, I'm not the only one. And
And this was
then
fall of
this
2020,
was
Maria?
fall of 2020. Yeah. And we
So
had actually at that time we had some kids who were still in the traditional school system, that they're, school, they weren't at school. So they were showing up to some of the classes too.
yeah, that
Um,
was what I was going to ask was what
yeah,
was your kind of initial composition? But so it was a mix
it was
of
a mix. Yeah,
people
for sure.
who were choosing
Yes.
homeschooling and
Yeah.
then some who were still in the
And
system.
then,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
And then even when we did launch, so after that, I'm like, okay, here's the deal. Our community is looking for something like this. And then it was kind of like, what route should I take? Should I do a
Mhm.
micro school, or should I, go to a bigger hybrid program? And we just always brought it back to our kids. So we have four. Our oldest at that time was like 8. She had turned 8. right? 7 or 8 years old. And I just kept bringing it back to them. Like, what do you guys want? And what types of, like, what do you want to learn? And what classes? Like, what kind of like bringing it back to letting them really have control of say, in the formation of the program. And after that, I realized like I don't think a micro school was what we were looking for because it could only be so many kids. And we really wanted that bigger community school feel. Like we wanted holiday parties and, a yearbook and, like all of those things that my husband and I loved about our traditional school experience. We didn't love like the classes or the academics. We loved the community piece of it. And so that's why we decided to really just like launch something big. I'm like, let's just go for it and see. And we started that first semester. I leased a space, a day camp,
Hmm.
and so the first official semester, which was spring of 2021, then as an official business. Um, all my staff was contracted on basically I don't know how many hours I'm going to be able to pay you. I don't know how many kids are going to come. Like, let's just see how many people will sign up. And we had 18 that first semester, and then it just grew from there. I mean, it was just each semester added another section and then another day. And now we're up to 4 days and three sections on most of those days, three cohorts, we call them.
Wow.
So
So how has it changed over the last few years? Obviously, you've
yeah,
grown now to nearly 150 students,
yeah.
up to 4 days,
Hmm.
lots of dynamic programming.
Hmm.
Who is now coming to
Hmm.
your program, and
Great.
how has that changed, or has it from the
Yeah.
beginning?
Great question. So there was kind of a transition. So in the very beginning with that soft launch, it was both traditional school kids and homeschool. And then there was this transition period where there was for our traditional school friends, they were still not having a lot of in-person class time, or they would, the times of where somebody would have COVID and then the class was had to be off for 2 weeks. So we had a few families who went to their administration and said, hey, we are going to join this other hybrid program, and we're going to miss at that family that I'm thinking of specifically. They came every Thursday, and they said we're pulling our kids from school every Thursday, and we're sending them there. And the administration said it's an unconventional idea, but we are living in unconventional times. So they
Wow.
approved it and they allowed them to just pull their kids out. And so we had that for a few semesters where we had kids from the traditional school coming to spend the day outdoors. It was like a good balance for those parents. And then now today, we're 100% homeschooled. We just don't have any. I mean, we would be welcome to families who wanted to do that, but we just happen to have all of our families, all our homeschool families now.
Yeah. So do you feel like there would still have been, or there would still be that interest from the school district to allow families to
I don't
come?
know. I don't
Okay.
know. I think at that point, like the districts had so much stuff going on
Yeah.
that they were kind of like, ah,
Yeah.
whatever. You
Yeah.
know, I don't know. I don't know if there would be pushback now.
Interesting.
Districts still have a lot going on. So,
Right, right. Yeah.
so,
So with these roughly 150 students,
mhm.
all technically registered legally as
Yeah.
homeschoolers,
Yep.
are they a mix of families who were homeschooling pre-COVID, kind of long-term homeschoolers, or new families? I guess, what is that composition
Yeah.
like?
It's a mix. I would say most of our families are COVID schoolers. So they started during COVID times. And most of our families were not planning to homeschool. I mean,
Interesting.
like the parents weren't homeschooled as children.
Right.
Just because we're an untraditional, like we don't fit the traditional mold for some of those different homeschool co-ops out there. So yeah, most of our families really didn't anticipate homeschooling, but they started during COVID and they kind of like ourselves, they got a taste of freedom. And then it was like, oh, we can't go back now. So, yeah.
Wow. Okay. And then what about any new families, kind of in the last year or two who are new to homeschooling, just similar
Yeah,
to you, not
yeah,
really liking what they're seeing in the
yeah,
traditional system.
exactly. Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Wow.
That's
Okay.
exactly that. They're like they're just not convinced by the traditional path. So they're just wanting to try something different.
Great. And so, so tell us then how it works. You're technically set up as a business. Is it like a tutoring business for homeschoolers, or how?
Exactly. It's
What is
educational
your?
services. Yep,
Okay.
educational services. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which gives
exactly.
you, I would imagine, lots of flexibility in terms of the programs you're offering. Are parents expected to be on site, or are you able to have it be a drop off and have staff? And what is the staffing
Yeah.
like for you?
Yeah, so it is drop off. And that was important to us too, because when we were looking at co-ops, most of the co-ops in our area, the parent had to be there with them. And from talking with people that were enrolled in theirs, it just changed the dynamic when the parent was there.
Yeah,
The kids kind of stayed in their like, cohesive unit with their parent. Um, and so, yeah, it's drop off, and parents love that. It's their day to like
yeah,
catch their breath or to crank out a lot of work. Our
yep.
staff, they're all contracted. So we've got a staff of 16 that teach all sorts of
Wow.
different things. We offer forest play, we have drama and cooking and art and movement, and it's all enrichment based. So nothing, we won't ever offer a math class, a literacy class. Those things are obviously woven in, but we don't deliver any standard curriculum at all. Because I strongly believe that like that's kind of the beauty. It's almost like flipping the model, right? So
Hmm.
the kids come together for the social time, and the enrichment and all that hands-on kind of fun learning. And then the more like, for lack of a better word, a little bit more stuffy things that happens at home. Like, and the kids are just doing it at their own pace. So we have
Yeah.
parents that are new to our community, and that's a hesitation a lot. Like, oh, well, my kid, isn't reading. He's 8 and he's not a strong reader. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. Like, nobody will ever know. Nobody cares, first of all. And like, that's not what we're focused on. We're not going to sit and ask him to read a paragraph out loud or anything like that. Like, these kids are all, it's multi-age learning. Nobody knows where the other kids are academically at all. I mean, it's just they're just getting together to really learn, and get some hands-on experiences.
But for some of those parents who might be new to homeschooling or this may
Mhm.
feel intimidating,
Mhm.
are you able to offer curriculum suggestions?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we do,
Yeah.
we'll talk through different options. We have a private Facebook group, which is really active as well, which is a nice thing. So a mom can say, hey, I'm looking for a new math curriculum. What are you guys doing? Or what does your day look like? And then that's part of it too, is like building up this community, um, amongst the parents too. So we offer a lot more than just, I mean, like the program is named Our Village, right? So the idea is like to build this community and have this village that you can turn to, and not just like oh, I drop my kids off at this random place once a week. No, we offer mom's night out. We have family book clubs. We have parent book clubs. We have field trips. I mean, just all of that other stuff. Informal meetups. We go to plays together and concerts, and really have this community feel. And I think that's where parents really appreciate it. It's like a place to land. So if you have a question about, gosh, I'm struggling with this, biology unit, they have this network of people to talk to about it.
Amazing. So I'm just looking at some homeschooling data for Minnesota that's been
Hmm.
compiled by the Johns Hopkins University Homeschool Hub, a phenomenal
Hmm.
resource that's run by Professor Angela Watson, trying to look at sort of data and trends around homeschooling nationally. And
Okay.
what they're reporting there is that in the spring of 2020, about 4.6% of Minnesota families were homeschooling. There
Uh-huh.
was a jump during that kind of COVID time to nearly 10%. But what's
Wow.
really fascinating is that as of the 23-24 school year, so the previous school year to
Yeah.
this one,
Uh-huh.
4.93% of Minnesota families were homeschooling, which was more than in the spring of 2020, kind of before the height of COVID. Are
Mhm.
you seeing that play out? Are you finding that there is growing interest in homeschooling and other sorts of alternative education
Yes,
models?
for sure. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And
Yeah,
what do you, yeah, what do you think? Yeah, what do you
yeah, I
think
mean, I
is
just think it's
driving that?
becoming, it's just people are starting to understand that they have a say in the educational journey, right? That you don't have to take the traditional steps. Like, I don't know, I just think that people are finally starting to realize that there's more options. Um, and that's one of the silver linings, right, of COVID was that it, I mean, that we probably, I don't know, I think about that all the time. Like, would we have ultimately pulled our kids had COVID not pushed us into it? Probably, because I had
Hmm.
lasted only a year and a half where I was like, oh, this is not how it should be done. Like, she should be playing, they should be outdoors. I mean, there should just, I mean, in the school that I was at, which was a private school, we weren't allowed to send worksheets home. I mean, the principal was like, we don't believe in that. Like, kids should not be doing worksheets. And this idea of homework, I mean, even in first grade, it was like, I'm not my first grader, I just gave her to you for 8+ hours. I'm not having her do any homework when she gets home, period. So yeah, I mean, I just think, and maybe that's what COVID did for other families as well. It kind of just opened up options.
So what is that? What is the impact of that on our village school? Are you at capacity? Are you
Mhm.
still enrolling new families? Are you still at that same camp
Yeah.
location? What's going on there?
So we continue, we're not quite at capacity yet. So we have a little bit more room for growth um, within that. So we have our kids are kind of grouped in multi-age um, cohorts. So we have explorers who are 6 to 9 years old, and then we have our adventurers who are 10 plus. And now where we'll see some of our growth now, right, is like our population of kids is aging. And so as they have gotten older over these last 4 or 5 years, now we'll have a third installment that will launch this fall, and those will be our trailblazers, and that will be for 13 plus. So
Wow.
I mean, that's the thing is like the retention is really high in our community. So we have kids um, who have aged through, and now the parents are kind of, everyone's like, well, what's next? So we're in that phase. So we have a little bit more room to bring in some more in our explorers and adventurers, but we'll see some more growth adding trailblazers, which will be an older program.
And what is sort of your maximum capacity? And is that based just on your location or what do you
Yeah,
think?
it's based more on our location because we are out. I mean, we primarily operate outdoors, but we're in Minnesota, so that works a lot of the time. Sometimes it gets a little tricky. And I come from a private school model, so I could run up the class sizes really, really high, but I don't want to do that. Like I came from a 1 to 12 student ratio. So I like a small feel in these cohorts. We don't really go above 18 in a cohort. Sometimes we have to, but we try to stay right around 18. So the site really dictates our capacity. So we could
Yeah.
probably go about 165 at that site for our explorers and our adventurers. Our trailblazers will be at a different site because that will just be a different kind of program.
And that's for the 13 plus.
And that's for the 13 up. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
Oh, that's
fun, kind of
great.
dreaming up the next little baby.
So, how do families typically use our village school? Are they using it just typically 1 day a week? Are many of them using it 4 days a week? What
A
does that
lot
look
of
like?
so they have an option for 1 day attendance or 2 day. So they can't
Okay.
actually go all 4 days
Okay.
because they would repeat classes. Their kids would repeat classes. So if you go 2 days a week, you would go Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday. And if you go 1 day a week, you just choose either, Monday or Wednesday, or Tuesday or Thursday. Um, we see the bulk of our families go twice a week. A lot of families enter once a week. They enter as one day,
Yeah.
single day enrollment. And I say that's great. Like I would do that too as a parent trying something out. And then we have a lot of families, we have a lottery system to add a second day because it just goes fast. Yeah. A lot of families want to add a second day. So yeah. And it's
So
fun. I mean, it's like the kids, the relationships
yeah,
they're strengthened, right? I mean, it's
right.
twice as much time that they're there with their buddies. So yeah,
So I'd love to shift gears a little bit, Maria,
sure.
and talk
Mhm.
a more about your experience as an education entrepreneur. It almost seems like you've come full circle with your background in business and
Yeah,
experience in the corporate world to then education and now combining both of those things.
right.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the business side and especially how maybe your business background helped your ability to run a successful program.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is a beautiful marriage of both of those degrees. So that's been really fun. People ask all the time, like, does it feel like a lot? Is it overwhelming? And I say, no, I mean, it's like almost like making your passion, your hobby, your work. I mean, it's really, I really enjoy it. And I feel like, yeah, I mean, I don't regret the path that I took because I feel like my business skill set that I honed when I thought I would be some, corporate executive, is helpful. I mean, I can build a spreadsheet like nobody else. So those things are really helpful. Those kind of executive functioning skills that I learned on the business side, are really helpful in running a business. And just like, all the planning and all the pieces that go into it. I think there's some people that I sit down with who maybe want to start something. And when we start to kind of get into the nuts and bolts, I think that is the piece that kind of steers people away from it, where they're like,
Hmm.
oh, it seems like a lot. It's more than just kids getting together, right? It's more than just building a schedule. There's a lot of different things that play into that. And then, yeah, the education piece, like that's been really great too, because I kind of through working in the private school and homeschooling, I feel like I've really dialed in what my educational philosophy is and then been able to really bring that to life while also run a business. So marry those together. Yeah, so it's been a beautiful blend with those
And
two.
and is it financially sustainable for
Mhm.
you? Are you, yeah, I know
Yeah,
that you left teaching to
yep,
raise your kids, but are you finding
yeah,
now that you are able to actually earn a decent living through this?
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's part of something too is like, you know, I it's a financial commitment for families, but I'm committed to delivering on my end. So I deliver a really top-notch program. I'm committed to delivering that and delivering a community in a village, not just like a daycare or a drop-off thing. I've committed to because I understand that. I understand it's a financial commitment for families. And so that's part of the business model is
Yeah.
I really want them to feel the value in that. Like, wow, we pay X amount, but we really get this whole infrastructure and we feel like there is this village around us. That's the goal. So,
So what have been some of the bigger entrepreneurial challenges over the past 4 or 5 years?
it's a great question. Um, I mean, I think I've been really fortunate with some of the hurdles that people might that we might run into are citing, that is always a challenge. And that was something that, I mean, just miraculously kind of all came together. We lease, as I mentioned, we lease space from a day camp locally. It's a YMCA day camp. And that was, kind of the timing really hit with that because it was COVID. So it was like, that first lease was a handshake, really. It was like sure, well, you can come out. Nobody else is using the camp. And then we really developed a friendship and relationship with that staff there. And so that's really worked out well. I mean, we haven't had I think for me personally, it's managing the growth um, because I think it probably could have even built more and faster. And, people ask a lot about multi-site, if I would consider going multi-site. And I still come back to like, I don't want to deliver a subpar product. Because in the end of the day, like, right, it is. And so I'm committed to that. And so I've been really intentional about slow growth, so that it doesn't get watered down or lose its luster. I don't know.
Yeah, and parents are thrilled with what you're doing. You have incredible retention and growth rates. In fact, the way that we were connected, Maria, was I received an email from one of the
Oh,
parents
yeah.
of some students in your program who said she listens to my podcast. She read my Unschooled book and thought that you would be a great addition to the podcast, which of course
Yes.
you are. I just want to read briefly what she wrote. She said, I first discovered our village school 4 years ago when I was looking for a secular outdoor program for my oldest child. He has now been attending for 4 years and tells me our village school is his happy place and is so
Um,
sad when classes end for the semester. Kudos to you, right? And
oh, yeah,
that you have such high parent satisfaction and learner
yeah,
satisfaction. This is, I
yeah.
think, even though so many of the learning spaces that I spotlight here and the founders I talk to, they're running very different models, all kinds of different educational philosophies and approaches, and yet this commonality that I hear over and over again is the kids love being at these schools and
Yeah,
spaces that
yeah,
they get sad when the semester
yeah,
ends or there's a vacation coming up. Why do you
yeah,
think that is? What is it about programs
yeah.
like yours that kind of create that joyful learning?
I think because we keep the kids central and we listen to the kids, and the kids drive the change in the program. I mean, we listen to feedback. I mean, it's an interesting dynamic because we have parents, right? And parents who have a certain expectations, and then we have the kids, and sometimes those expectations don't line up. So we really keep the kids centered, and that I will say, actually, that's been a hurdle sometimes, where it's like, oh, well,
Mm.
the parents might want this, and I just we just bring it back to the kids. It's like, what do the kids love? Like, how can we make it more novel for them? How can we give them experiences that they go home and they get in the car and it's not like, mom says, how was your day? And they go, meh, it's fine. Like, no, we want them to run in and say, oh my gosh, we're hatching chicks and we're doing all these cool things. And we had this cooking competition and it was just like we've seen before with Chopped. We opened up the basket items. And I mean, just those novel things that I want them to really remember, because those are the things that stuck with, my husband and I from the traditional model, was kind of all those really fun pieces. And so we were just really committed to, yeah, letting the kids, listening to the kids, following their lead, seeing what are the things that they really enjoy, and doing more of that then. And giving them, yeah, a lot of autonomy and say in what we do.
So, what does the future look like for you, Maria, if you think ahead to maybe five
Mhm.
years from now? I know you're building out this Trailblazers program for your
Yeah.
teens. You also said that you're very committed to, slow and steady
Mhm.
growth, being core to your mission, all of that. Where do you see our village school in
Yeah.
5 years?
Yeah. I do see it as a robust program from 6 to 15 now. Whereas before, when we started, it was 6 plus. That's it. And I would just smile. We're 6 plus. And now it's very clearly defined. Like, no, it is a program for 6 to 15 that can deliver on each of those years with experiences that are really meaningful for kids. 5 years from now, I hope we have a really robust trailblazer group. That's kind of where I'm putting a lot of energy in right now. And that's been really fun to just reinvent even that space. Because what I'm finding, and again, this is in Minnesota, and so this I can't speak to everywhere in the country, but where we are locally, when you get to those older ages, 13, 14, 15 years old, the co-ops that exist are more traditionally formed or based. I mean, it's like a history class, or you can go take a writing course, or you can do your science lab. And I think those are great, and there's a place for those. I just, I don't want to create something that already exists. And so that's been really fun to just um, really dive into like, okay, what do we want? Like, what do we want for our kids, and what can we give them that they can't get training in right now? And so there's been some really fun pieces that have come out of that, like entrepreneurship for sure,
Mm.
travel for sure, like giving them um kind of letting them take the reins on planning some bigger trips as groups, planning events, having more adventures. We'll be doing something with like adventure days for that older group. So just, yeah, it's been really fun to look at because I feel like, especially with COVID schoolers, our kids were younger when they came out. And so we dialed in like what this could look like when they were younger. And now I feel like a lot of these COVID schoolers, now their kids are getting older and everyone's kind of sitting there going, what is next?
Yeah.
What's the next thing? And so really kind of reinventing that to and listening to the kids, letting the kids drive it and say, what are the things that are central that you want to keep as a part of your education? Like for an example, my daughter who's 12 now says, "Oh, I would really hate to give up cooking." So, okay, well, how can we level up cooking? And so now it's like, okay, well, maybe we could do like some larger scale events where you guys could be involved in. I don't know if you ever watch like Top Chef, where they do
Yeah.
restaurant wars and they have to, brand their restaurant and come up with the menu and make all
Yeah.
the food for a seated dinner. And that could help them fundraise for some travel. And meanwhile, they were traveling, planning a trip and all that that entails. So yeah, it's fun to look at like what that education can look like for them now. So.
Yeah, and you said ages 6 to 15. Do
Mhm.
you feel like you're going to stop at 15? Could you imagine classes
I,
for 16,
you know,
17, 18?
it'll be interesting. Like we'll have to touch base in 5 years, Kerry, and
Yeah.
see, or in 3 years. I did not think that we would go even as high as we've gone.
Hmm.
And the kids just, they love it. There's a sense of community. I feel like I can't just say, see ya now to this community. I mean, even we kind of loosely aged out at 13-ish. Um, and then it was like, well, then what? Like, then what do those kids do? I have this sense that 15 is the right age. And that's through their 15th year. So meaning like when they turn 16, they're kind of out. And I have this sense, and I don't know, maybe that will change. I mean, I'll bring it back to the kids and see where kind of a check-in, not just with our own, but with our community of like, what do these kids want next? Are they ready for more independence? They're driving, they kind of have their community established, they're into different things. Maybe some are doing post-secondary options. I don't know. I'm not sure. Or maybe it will be the same thing that I thought 2 years ago, where I thought, well, we'll just age out at 13. And then family said, no, like why? Why stop now?
Right.
So
Wow. Oh, it's just exciting to see what will come. And like you said, just listening to the needs of your families and
yeah,
meeting those needs in creative ways. So, as
yeah.
we wrap up, Maria, I'd
Mhm.
love your advice for other prospective founders. Maybe there's parents or teachers or both, as in your
Mhm.
case, a parent and a teacher, who are frustrated with existing education options, can't find what they're looking for, and are feeling that tug to build something
Yeah,
new and different. What
yeah,
advice do you have for them?
yeah. I would say to be courageous and just I think just make a decision. Nothing is forever. And so I tell families that a lot.
Hmm.
I get a lot of calls and emails from parents who are thinking about maybe pulling their kids and they're not sure. And I think people have to realize that nothing is forever. So you can always change. If you pull your kid and it's a total train wreck, which I don't think it will be. I think you will find it to be really refreshing and you will have room to breathe and you will have a lot of freedom and say in what your day looks like. But if it doesn't, you can always go back. You can always change course. But I think it's just really having the courage to like, okay, we're just going to jump ship or we're just going to try it. And it's the same even with entrepreneurs that want to form something. It's like, just try it, you know? I mean, just put something out there. And there's not a huge startup cost to it. So run, like I did, run a few classes if you can, or, just get a sense in your community if there is a need for that. We were in a really lucky spot because nothing really existed like our program at that point. Now other ones have popped up.
Hmm.
And I think they are, across the country, but yeah, see if there's a need for it in your community and just do, I mean, even if it's like, you're hosting something in a public park, so you don't have to pay to lease that space, just to see if there's a taste for it in your community and then go for it.
Or in your backyard, like
Or
how
in your
you
backyard. I mean,
started.
that's what I'm like, well, we'll just do it in our backyard. And then it was like, well, I can't charge for it. We'll do donation based.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, just you can work around it to see if there's a desire for it. Um, and then it's like field of dreams, right? If you build it, they'll come. So yeah.
So, if my listeners and viewers want to follow your journey and see what the
Mhm.
next 5 years hold at our village
Yeah.
school or connect with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Yes. So Instagram and Facebook, you can find us there on our village school, is our handle there. I will say I'm not great about posting. I'm great about during the season, highlighting our fun through there, but yeah, those are the best spots. We have a website too, ourvillageschool.com. You can check it out there. But yeah, we'll be highlighting, especially the fun with the Trailblazers, because I think it's just going to be a really unique program. It might not be for everybody, but I think it's going to launch these kids into a future that I don't know that the traditional model is preparing them for. So yeah, I'm excited about that.
Well, I'm excited too. It'll be great to have you back on the
Yeah.
show in a
Mm-hmm.
while and hear how things are going. And
For
until
sure.
then, Maria Stalsberg, thank you so much for being
Yeah, of
on the
course.
Liberated podcast.
Thanks, Kerry. It was great chatting with you.